Turn our attention to one of the big stories of Saturday, because Tottenham have spent a lot of money in the course of the transfer window, and they made a really bad start to the campaign. They were ripped apart by an impressive Brentford at the G-Tech on Saturday evening. Tottenham have spent in the region of £237 million this summer. They may spend some more as well before next week. They twice broke their transfer record in an attempt to avoid a repeat of last season's struggles, yet found themselves 3-0 down by the end of the match. Here's what manager Roberto De Zerbi said concerning the hangover from last year. Oh, stop it. Here's Roberto De Zerbi.
We can't forget last season. We have to understand with a big session of transfer market, big window of transfer market, are not enough to win the games. You can't win the games on the paper with the papers. You can win the game when you become teams. And now we are not a team.
Brentford's new signing Sangare, meanwhile, impressed, and Keith Andrews' players look equipped to handle the pressure.
The club deserve a lot of credit. Firstly, identifying him and then being able to get that deal done was really impressive work. No doubt Amadou had a lot of suitors and would have had a lot of options. Really liked him from what I'd seen from afar, met him, liked him even more, and then thankfully we were able to get the deal done.
Let's talk to Chris Cowlin, shall we, from the Spurs Chat Podcast. Chris, good evening.
Nick, Emily, good evening to you.
Nice to hear from you, and thank you for coming on to talk about this rather delicate subject. We've been sort of saying that Spurs fans shouldn't panic, and I imagine as a man who, to put it mildly, has seen a few of these sorts of things over the years, your feet are very much on the ground. Is that fair?
It is fair, Nick. We spoke many times last season under Thomas Frank, Igor Tudor, and then, of course, Roberto De Zerbi saved us at the end of the campaign. But a lot of us Spurs fans, including myself, we've been very excited over the summer. We've seen real ambition, and this is a completely different way of going about things at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. So we're delighted to see the money spent and backing the manager, etc. But we all went to the G-Tech with high expectations, and we hope, to see a number of the new signings. Five players made their debuts in the end, but the performance and the result was absolutely abysmal, as you said. And there were so many problems. The players looked like strangers on Saturday at the G-Tech. And, don't take it away from Brentford. They were absolutely superb. Brentford were ready for the Premier League campaign. And as Roberto De Zerbi said in the post-match presser, Tottenham weren't ready for the season to start.
And do you think they will spend more money between now and the end of the campaign, at the end of the transfer window?
We have to, Nick. I think, most Spurs fans will agree that we're lacking real firepower in the final third. I know it's very, very difficult to replace a player like Harry Kane and a player like Heung-min Son, but those positions are needed. Real quality is needed in that final third. I know there's a lot of talk about Savinho and Marmoush, joining the football club in the next couple of days. So that will be of great delight to us because we need different options in that final third. Richarlison isn't cutting it at the moment. Dominic Solanke has had so many injury problems since he's come in at Tottenham. But to answer your first point, I remain very optimistic. I know it was a really, really bad day on Saturday, but as De Zerbi also said in the post-match presser, this has happened on the first day of the season, but we'll learn a real lesson from this. We need to learn lessons very, very quickly, and we need to move on. We need a win against Charlton on Wednesday, and we need a good performance going into that Newcastle game on Saturday. And I know we spoke a lot last season, and Spurs only won 3 Premier League games, so that's another thing that needs to be sorted. But availability was a big issue as well on Saturday, and the likes of Van der Ven, Pedro Porro, when they come back, it'll be stronger in the defensive area. And Mohamed Kudus, Kulusevski, Javi Simmons, they've all got to come back as well. So there's a lot. There's been a lot of change at Spurs, but there is a lot more to happen, and it is a big transition. We've gone through so many different managers since we moved into that stadium in 2019. So it's been a lot of big changes, but I do have a lot of optimism with De Zerbi and this season.
And your concern does seem to be about getting the right people in. You didn't. I think the problem that some people saw on Saturday was some of the kind of the old failings, which have to go. and they haven't gone yet. You think that, well, you've already said optimism is something that's at the centre of your mind at the moment. You're not concerned that some of those old failings, that the fact that if you run into a team who are just going to knock you about a little bit, it's going to cause problems, that won't be a long-term issue for you.
Well, I think aggression is one thing that really does need to intensify at Tottenham, and we do need to be a lot more aggressive as well. But we just weren't doing the basics on Saturday, and that is a big problem. And even when you look at the new players that made their debut on Saturday at the G-Tech, Sandro Tonali being one, £100 million package for him, and it was a really, really poor performance. But I think overall it was a really poor performance from every single player. Mateus Fernandes, when he came on in the second half, he was a shining light. But apart from that, it was a really dismal performance, and you could see a very frustrated Roberto De Zerbi on the sidelines. And I'm not being funny, Nick. It was like we were in another pre-season friendly where Brentford were up for a Premier League game, and there's no easy games in the Premier League. And I know that De Zerbi has said a couple of times about the trip to Australia, and New Zealand. I did that trip myself, and I'm still recovering from it now. And I'm not playing the matches. It was a long trip, but they went to New Zealand, 26-hour journey, and they were in New Zealand for 42 hours. Then went to Australia. So it was a big trip. I get it from a club's point of view, commercial point of view, but when a manager is trying to prepare for a new season and transition so many different changes, it probably didn't help.
Chris, you work very hard on these trips. I know that for certain because I've spoken to you on a few of them, so I know how much stuff you put into it as well, to be honest with you. Possibly not as much as the players, but thank you very much indeed for your time, Chris Cowlin. It's always great to get your views. Chris being very optimistic at the moment. No need to panic, no need to have much more soul-searching, and my goodness me, Spurs have done plenty of that over recent times. But Chris Cowlin from the Spurs Chat Podcast, great to get his views on Total Sport this evening. It's only half the story though, isn't it? Brentford played really well and won handily, and I'm very pleased to say that Mike Johnson from the Ealing Road podcast is with us on Total Sport tonight. Mike, hello.
Hi Nick, how you doing, mate?
I'm very good, thank you, and really appreciate your time this evening. And I get the feeling that most Brentford fans, as well as enjoying what was a brilliant performance and result, were thinking everyone's just going to talk about Spurs and not mention Brentford. But just how good were your team on Saturday night?
We were brilliant, Nick. But as you mentioned, like most of the coverage has been Spurs, so it's a difficult one. I kind of came away from the game thinking about not trying to get too carried away with the result, because we were really good, but Spurs were pretty abject at the same time. But you kind of always go into that first game of the season a little bit nervous, a little bit excited. Brentford had a really good window. I still think we probably need one more for it to take it to that next level, but I think what you saw from Keith Andrews, as Chris said before me, was a side that looked together. We went for continuity over the summer. We've not changed too much. We've added a bit of quality in midfield with the likes of Sangare. And yeah, I've still not come down, to be honest, Nick. It was the perfect way to start the new season.
Were you surprised, and this isn't me doing it from the Spurs perspective, but were you surprised at how weak Spurs were?
I think, yeah, massively. I know that, Spurs fans will point to the fact that maybe 3 or 4 of their players maybe might start in the next game. But when you look still, these are still players that were playing under Thomas Frank and Igor Tudor and De Zerbi towards the back end of last season. And when you look at the comparative wage bill, when you look at the cost of the squad, even with those players that maybe might not be starting for Spurs next week in the next game, you would still think that they would put up a better fight than what they showed. But as I've kind of been saying, and as I've said on many different outlets, on my podcast, in my videos as well, I think the reason Spurs have fallen down over the last kind of few years is just terrible recruitment. And when you look at the players that started for Brentford in their front line, and you look at Richarlison, who cost Spurs £50 million, you can kind of see the difference there. So I was surprised, but I was also surprised with how good Brentford are as well. I didn't see that kind of performance coming. I was confident before the game, but I didn't see the kind of first 10-15 minutes, the first half really. We just blew them away.
Let us talk about Mamadou Sangare if we can,
yes,
because there's that wonderful moment on the footage at full time when the Brentford players are celebrating with their fans, as they should, and they're all kind of pushing Sangare forward, saying, no, you were brilliant. This is your moment. You get in front of all of us and you take the acclaim on your home debut. It was a lovely moment for him. You could tell he was a bit shy about it, but for those who didn't watch Match of the Day or didn't see the game, what was so special about him? Why did all those players, with the encouragement of the fans, say, Mamadou, you go forward, you take a bow?
It's a mixture of a few things. I think Brentford have lacked a complete package in the way that I think, or at least what that first performance showed us about Mamadou Sangare. Not only is he able to kind of dominate the game from an out of possession perspective, but when he was on the ball, it was a version of Brentford that I've not seen in the Premier League before, in that since we've been up, we've had a very clear game model under Thomas Frank against the bigger teams and against teams that like to have more possession. We'd sit back and we'd counter-attack quite heavily throughout the game. But we were kind of missing a little bit of quality in midfield. And what Sangare did against Spurs on Saturday was, like I said at the top, so dominant out of possession in terms of those regains and winning the ball back, and tackles and interceptions, but just the elegance, just the way that he moved, Nick, it's just moved me from the edge of my seat. The way that he picked up the ball, the flicks, the passes, the awareness, the strike for the third goal, I thought was just, on the rebound for Coyote's goal, I thought was brilliant. But yeah, it was a complete performance, and he came in with a lot of hype, club record transfer fee, and you all kind of do your due diligence on players from other leagues that you don't potentially watch. But when you looked at the statistics and you saw that he was one of the best performing players in the French top flight last season, it gets you very, very excited, especially when you factor in that we beat off some bigger clubs for his signature. So yeah, I think the way that he was pushed towards the West Stand at the end of the game was brilliant. And, it was a 10 out of 10 performance from him.
Mike, what do you think Brentford can achieve this season? Because obviously you came so close to Europe last year. You've got Keith Andrews now. He's had a whole season with you. And you've just beaten Spurs on the opening day. I know it's only the first game and it's easy to get carried away. But what realistically do you think Brentford can achieve now?
We're winning it all. No?
That's the spirit. That's what I want to hear on the opening weekend. We're going to win the lot. Exactly.
No, I think... the natural step for a club like Brentford is Europe now. We're going into our 6th season in the Premier League. And it's kind of a way, and we've chatted about this quite a lot on our pod, but it's kind of a way for Keith Andrews to kind of go ahead of Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank's always going to have it over him that he was the manager that got us into the Premier League. Never quite able to make that step in terms of getting into Europe. But if Keith Andrews did manage to do that with this team, and I think what you saw on Saturday is hopefully an indication that he can, I think that is the next step for a club like Brentford. You look at the couple of years that Palace have had, winning the FA Cup, being in Europe, winning the Conference League, and now they're in the Europa League as well. You look at what Brighton have done, what Bournemouth have done. I think the next step for Brentford, yes, we've got these fantastic players, and yes, we've got these strikers that can score 20 goals. But the next step, I think if you offered me a season in Europe, Nick and Emily, I think I would die a very happy man. So one season in Europe and we could get relegated afterwards, I would not care.
Mike, you're bringing tears to our eyes. Just how much this would fulfil your dreams. It's brilliant to hear you speak so well about Brentford and to tell us about some of the real highlights that fans can look forward to at the GTEC this stadium this season. Mike Johnson from the Ealing Road podcast, thank you very much indeed. Brilliant to hear from Mike. And yeah, I think that European clamour got quite loud last season. Yeah. It didn't quite happen. They're going to play like that and get results like that. They're going to keep.
They need a Palace run, a Crystal Palace run.
Yeah.
An FA Cup win maybe for Brentford?
I think, a cup win is, yes. All these clubs must have seen what Palace did and thought,
yeah, we can do that.
If you're Fulham, and this is an old sore with Fulham, but yeah, Fulham lost that quarter-final against Crystal Palace. Absolutely pivotal game a couple of seasons ago, and Fulham must have looked at what's happened to Palace since and gone, that could so easily have been us. A reminder, we're on YouTube this evening. Good evening to you if you're watching the programme. Rafael from Brazil asked what the latest is on Savinho and Marmoush. No confirmation that either of them have signed on the dotted line yet, but it does appear that both could be moving forward to signing on the dotted line for Tottenham, and bolstering that attack that Chris Cowlin has just been talking about needs bolstering, but we'll find out. Raphael's been watching us on YouTube. It's great to have you as part of the programme. If you are watching us on YouTube and you want to comment, just put some comments about the programme in the comment box, and we will read them. If you want to talk about how Brentford might qualify for Europe this season or win the Cup or the lot, as Mike has said. If you're a Tottenham fan and you don't want to panic, or maybe you do want to panic, I don't know. And we're going to talk about Crystal Palace and Fulham and